for joining us today. You're about to hear a message from Pastor John Hill, and we believe that God's Word is alive, and every time you hear it preached, it can transform your life. Thanks again for joining us.
Oh man, First Church, that's like the greatest movie scene of all time. I call it the cinematic event of the decade. That was awesome. That was a clip from the 2009 rendition of Star Trek, directed by J.J. Abrams. And man, I love that movie. I think it's a little obvious today that I really enjoy that movie. But I think there's something about that scene that grabs our hearts. There's a certain greatness in the meaningfulness of George Kirk's sacrifice to save his family. That it's unique because he dies, but there's something in us that yearns for that level of meaning at the end of his life. We see the heroism in it, the adventure that's behind it. And there's something about me now, look, I don't want to die, but there's something about me that wants that wants the meaning, the adventure that his life had. Because you see what he does, and in his death, his life has such an incredible sense of meaning. It's interesting how movies, every single decade and age, grasp onto a certain desire of a generation. You know, it's interesting to me when you watch Charlie Chaplin, you know, in the 19-teens, his silent movies. He's just an everyday man who has no consequences in his life, even though he makes terrible mistakes. And I think that generation yearned to live a life of excess and be able to make mistakes without facing dire consequences like death and starvation in their lives. You know, and that movie captured the heart of that generation. I think in the same way in the 80s, you know, you had Sleepless in Seattle, Pretty in Pink, When Harry Met Sally. You had all these movies that encapsulated that happily ever after love story that people were desperate for in the 80s. You know, thank God that that's over. And today, if you look at our generation, in our age, and you look at the top grossing movies of 2014, you have Gravity, Taken, Captain America, Avengers, Batman, Interstellar, Hunger Games, The Hobbit, Maze Runner, Fury. Nearly all the top grossing films of 2014 encapsulated people who had an adventure, and they were heroic, and then they found meaning in their life. Maybe not so much Fury, but meaning part. That was adventurous, but it was a very sad ending. Anyway, these movies encapsulate so much of the adventurous lifestyle that I think God wrote on our hearts. We live a life thinking that Jesus is meek and mild, but the Bible repeatedly shouts out that Jesus was not meek and mild. Jesus is strong and wild. You see, I don't think that desire for adventure, that desire for meaning, that desire for heroics is something that isn't a part of us until the fall. I think that's something that means we were created in God's image. That's part of God inside of us, desiring to live an adventurous life. You see, I think God wrote that desire on our hearts, and we see that evidenced in the life of Christ all over Scripture. I mean, the Bible is full of examples of Jesus being a hero, Jesus being adventurous, Jesus living on the edge, doing great things with his life, because Jesus was willing to boldly go where no one else was willing to go, to reach people that no one else was reaching. You see, I think his heart for us was to be a people and a church that was willing to boldly go where no one else would go, to reach people where no one else was being reached. And the key passage today is Matthew 16, starting at verse 13, going all the way up to verse 17. And I just want to read this verse to you guys today, this first verse, 13 here. Some of you guys will have heard it, some of you not. But it says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? And what I want you to understand is this is a watershed moment in Jesus' ministry. Okay? This is the point. The first part of Jesus' ministry was very conservative. It was very simple. Jesus was a superstar. He was very popular and very not controversial. But Jesus is about to enter a moment in his ministry where he's going to become very, very controversial. Still very popular, but very controversial. It's a watershed moment for him. And some of you guys have heard this passage where Jesus says, who do people say the Son of Man is? And eventually Simon Peter is going to say, well, surely, you're the Christ, the Son of God, And it's a big declaration. Some of you guys have never heard that, and that's fine. That's what's going to happen here. Most people look at what's about to come and say that's like the main point of the passage. But as a Jewish person living in the Greco-Roman world, the most controversial, incredibly radical portion of this passage is actually the phrase, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi. That statement, I want you to understand, is like grenade in the middle of the room. You know, everybody's like, what? Jesus went to Caesarea Philippi? There are two cities in the Greco-Roman world and the Judeo-Christian heritage that were like nobody went to, okay? Corinth, to a lesser extent, and then to a greater extent, nobody went to Caesarea Philippi. I want you to understand that this city made Las Vegas blush. It was the worst of the worst cities, and no self-respecting Jewish person would go there. I mean, Jesus is going here, and literally he's risking exile. People are like, well, we're never going to follow that guy again. It is the most controversial decision he has made up to this point. And I want you to understand, the city is full of debauchery, specifically because they worship a god called Pan, okay, an idol called Pan. And what you need to understand about idol worship, a lot of times people think it's like burning incense and whatever. I mean, idol worship is crazy. Like, idol worship, it gets nuts, like child sacrifice, all kinds of crazy things that happen. But Pan specifically, if you have read Percy Jackson and the Olympians or the Lightning Thief series, Pan is in that series, but a really whitewashed version of Pan. Pan is goat from the bottom and man from the top up, except he's got horns on his head. And he's specifically known for his prowess in the bedroom department. And worship of Pan it's not like, it's crazy. It's men, women, boys, girls, animals, all of it happens in this city. It's crazy what's happening in this city. Okay? I mean, and I want you to understand that the Greco-Roman world of this age, they were not conservative at all, but they gave the city the nickname the Gates of Hell, or the Gates of Hades. The gates of Hades. And that's what they called the city because it was so crazy there. And, you know, Jewish people, very conservative, you know, very moral. There was a strong ethical code there. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. But for the Greco-Roman world, which was pretty much an anything-goes society, to call a city the gates of hell, it means it's pretty horrendous. It's terrible. Okay? And what's happening right now is the disciples have been journeying for a week. It wasn't like Jesus just appeared there. He left Capernaum. It took about a week to get to the gates of hell. And have you ever been on a long road trip where you dread to see the person that you're going to go see? Like, you know, you're going to see your mother-in-law and you're like, oh, golly, I sure hope we get a flat tire. You know, or whatever. You know, I mean, they're like, you know, as they're going. And the disciples are like, are we seriously? We're going to Caesarea Philippi? And I imagine them just coming over the crest of a hill. And there is the city below them. And they've been journeying for a week. It was a generally uphill walk. It's a treacherous journey. Desert, not a good journey for them. They've been dreading it. And suddenly there it is, the gates of hell in front of them. And they can smell, literally see, and hear the worship of Pan going on right now in that city. I mean, it's ridiculous as they get there and they're nervous. So I want you to understand the statement, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, there's a whole lot attached to that statement. And here's what I want you guys to understand. This is crucial for the talk today. Jesus was willing to go where no one else would go, boldly, to reach people that no one else was reaching. Jesus was willing to boldly go. Don't put that up yet. Take that down. Big mistake. Get that down from there. Jesus was willing to boldly go where no one else would go to reach people that no one else was reaching. He does it all the time in his ministry, okay? He goes to Samaria to reach people. He sits with the Samaritan woman at the well, okay? He goes to her. He sits with her at the well. Totally controversial. No one else would go there, but he went there. Jesus is willing to talk to Zacchaeus. He's willing to talk to tax collectors, prostitutes, centurions who represent the oppressors and captors of the Jewish nation. He does ministry with them. He's willing to boldly go and talk to them. No one else is willing to do this. Jesus is willing to do this. Jerusalem. He goes to Jerusalem knowing he's going to die. He knows he's going to die. Death threats have already been put there, but he says, you know what? I want to reach people that no one else is reaching. So I'm going to go to Jerusalem with 6 inches of snow in a Toyota Prius because God's called me to reach people far from God. So Jesus is willing to do this. I want you to understand that one of the core characteristics of Jesus' ministry is that he's willing to boldly go where no one else is willing to go, to reach people that no one else is reaching. It is a part of his ministry. It's a part of who he is. It's literally a trait that we see in the early church. That is Jesus. He was bold. He was willing to do whatever. And he wasn't afraid of rules, ritual, and religion. He violated socially normative behavior in order to get to somebody that needed to hear his message. And so today I want to ask us as a church, what does boldly going to Caesarea Philippi look like for us as a church? What does boldly going to Caesarea Philippi look like to us as a church? What does that look like? You see, if Jesus was willing to go places that no one else was willing to go, to reach people that no one else was willing to reach, and the early church did that, I really believe that that should be a characteristic for us as a church. What does boldly going look like for us? Today I want to go over 3 simple things that going boldly looks like. And then I want to look at the rest of the passage right at the very end here, because it has an awesome ending. But boldly going means boldly pioneering, first and foremost. Boldly going means that boldly pioneering, that we're willing to boldly pioneer something. My wife and I, we thought we were nuts for coming to this town. I'll be honest. When I first saw the posting, when we were interviewing with the search committee, we were talking, we're like, really? There's 21 churches that we counted in town, including ours. 20 other churches. We literally had to drive by 20 churches to get to this one, and we prayed about it, and we thought about it, and we knew. We were very certain that God was calling us here. And in both of our hearts, we were like, why? You know, I've gotten to be here for a while, though, and I've gotten to talk to, and I'm very certain. I love it here. It's great. But I was trying to unpack, like, why did God place this very strong calling on our heart to go to DeMotte? I've gotten to meet with many of the different church staff members and pastors in the area, and this is what I want you to understand. There are precisely zero other churches in town that say we feel that God is calling us to reach people who have never set foot inside of a church before. Zero. No one else is doing it. You see, I want you to understand that 12 years ago when the leadership of this church felt called to change its direction, it wasn't because, we're excited about change. It wasn't because of this. It's because they said, hey, we feel like God's calling us to be like Jesus, and this town doesn't have a church that cares about people who have never been to church before. And we want to boldly go there. And this is what I want you to understand. In order to do that, if you want to boldly reach people that no one else is reaching, this is key, this is crucial, you have to be willing to do things that no one else is doing. Alcoholics Anonymous says it's insanity to do the same thing expecting a different result, right? If I just keep doing the same thing, if we're like, we want to reach people no one else is reaching, let's do the exact same thing that 20 other churches in town are doing. Ta-da! No, that's not going to be effective. That would be insanity. That would be crazy. We have to change the way that we're doing church. Jesus said, I have to violate socially normative behavior for Jewish tradition and culture because I want to reach people that the synagogue is not reaching. And we, following in the footsteps of Christ, got to think about doing the same things. We have to do things no one else is doing to reach people no one else is reaching. One of my favorite part about our tradition, our full name as a church, our middle name, when you get in trouble, like my name is John Juro Hill, nobody knew that. They're like, what did he say? What was his middle name? I've never heard that middle name before. Can you repeat it? No. Okay, but that's what I would hear when I would get in trouble, And so sometimes when our church is in trouble, it's a First Reformed Church. What are you doing? Because our middle name is Reformed, and that matters. That's something, that's a part of who we are. I love that that's a part of our tradition. Because we're reformers, because we're willing to reform things. One of my favorite parts of our heritage, there used to be this tradition called Yuletide, or the Yule Festival. And in the Yule Festival, the Germanic peoples would worship trees, and trees represented life, death, and fertility. Okay? These trees on December 25th were worshipped as a kind of a fertility symbol, and everybody would set up this phallic statement in their house. Being honest, that's the origin and heritage of Christmas trees. Okay? And then this guy, this reformer named Martin Luther said, you know what? This represents all kinds of crazy stuff. And around the Yule Festival, all kinds of people worship all kinds of crazy things. But I want to take this sexual symbol and I want to redeem it. And I believe, Martin Luther said, that 100 years from now, people are going to look at Christmas trees and think about Jesus being born on earth. Because we're reformers. We're going to take back the land that God wants us to take back. We're not kittens. We're lions. We're the Lion of Judah. We're going to roar at this. Those are the words of Martin Luther. That was his vision. That was his dream. That's what he saw happening. And look what happens. 1,000 years later, you guys are like, what? The Christmas tree is what? What are you talking about? What did that? Our Christmas tree is still up, by the way. We got to take that bad boy down. My fault. Kristen takes off the ornaments, which she did right after Christmas, and then it's my job to take down the tree. Praise God. It's still up. But anyway, that means what? Honey, you get that out of our living room right now. But that's his dream because he says we're reformers. That's why we as a church, I'm not sitting here going, oh, we need to do stuff. We need to pioneer something that's never, ever happened before. No. no. We're boldly pioneering. We're doing new things, but that's because that's what Jesus did. That's because what our church has always been. It's part of our identity. We are redeemers. We are reformers. We're taking back land. I heard people being like, oh, they played Mariah Carey in church. I don't want a lot for Christmas, especially Mariah Carey in church. I don't want it. But here's the truth. We're reforming. We're redeeming. We're reaching people in a context that would reach them effectively. I want you to know that, hey, I'm not that comfortable with it, but I believe that God called me to be a pioneer, to boldly pioneer and to boldly go where no one else is willing to go, to reach people that no one else is willing to reach. That's why we played Frozen again. I'm probably going to hear it 1,000 more times in my life. I don't want to hear Frozen again. I want to let that song go forever. But guess what? Here it is, and we're doing it, and we're reforming it, and we're redeeming it, and we're taking back ground for the kingdom, because God didn't say the church is a kitten. God said Jesus is the Lion of Judah. So we're going to act like lions. That's what God said. We're roaring at the enemy. We're not walking cowardly, scared from it, because God gave me claws and teeth. We don't have to run scared from the enemy, right? We're doing something. I'm going to announce this. This is a big deal for us as a church. But we have a new series coming up. And just like Martin Luther redeemed the Christmas tree, I want to redeem this area. The next series right after this one is going to be called 50 Shades of Marriage. You can put up the slide right now. And this is us as a church. Just like Martin Luther looked at the Christmas tree and he said, we're going to redeem it because this is what it represents. We're going to redeem this. We're going to bring it back, and I won't lie to you. If you don't know what 50 Shades is, it's an erotica novel series, just like the Christmas tree was, and just like Martin Luther did. I want to look at this and say, we're going to redeem this. Don't read the books if you haven't. If you have, I'm not judging you, but I believe that God has better for you. And I believe that 50 years from now, people in Jasper County are going to hear the phrase 50 Shades, and they're going to think about godly marriage. They're going to think about godly relationships. They're going to think about godly singleness, or whatever God is calling them to. And this marriage is going to look dating, sex, marriage, and singleness. That's what the weeks are of the series. And I'm excited. I believe that we're going to reform and retake land in Jasper County spiritually in the middle of this series. And I want to invite you guys to be a part of it. I want to invite you guys to bring your friends to it because it's going to be awesome. Now, I want to read a quick passage out of Acts 17, okay? This is what it says. Acts 17, verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply troubled by the idols he saw everywhere in the city. Okay? Keep in mind, no, don't go there yet. Keep in mind, idol worship involves crazy stuff. Okay? Paul sees this. He's walking around the city, and he sees books. He sees, 50 Shades of, he sees all this stuff in the city, and he's deeply troubled by it. I want you to understand it's okay to be deeply troubled by something that you see in the world. I believe the problem that Christians have, that the church has, is we see something that troubles us and we're like, running away, This is what Paul does. Check this out. Acts 17, verse 22. So Paul, standing before the council and the whole city, addressed them as follows. Men of Athens, I notice you are very religious in every way. For as I was walking along, I saw your many shrines, one of your altars, had this inscription on it, to an unknown God. This God whom you worship without knowing is the one I am telling you about. I want you to understand that Jesus is using Paul to redeem even that grotesque idolatry that was going on there. And I want you to understand that that is the example that we have as a church, to boldly go. I'm not doing this. I'm not asking us as a church to do something that is, because I like doing it, because our leadership team says it's a great idea. We're doing this because we believe that God does it. We believe that this is Jesus' heart for the church. We're following the Bible's example, okay? And yeah, we're pioneers following the leader, Jesus Christ. This isn't my idea. This isn't something that I think is awesome. I love hymns. I love the organ. Let's fire that up. But no, God has called us to boldly go. And so we're going to pioneer. We're going to do new things. And we're going to be brave and do great stuff. And I'm challenging you to look in your heart and find that. Because I believe that there's adventure and meaning in it. Okay? So boldly pioneering. The next part, boldly going, means boldly bringing. Boldly bringing. Okay? Jesus went and got people. I feel like a lot of times the church says, when you become like us, then you can be a part of us. I remember I brought a friend to church once, and he cursed like a sailor, smoked like a chimney. And I was talking with some people, and they're like, man, your friend smells like smoke, and he curses like a sailor. I was like, yeah, I know. I'm glad he's here. He's in the right place. Praise God. He's going to meet Jesus here and whatever, and he eventually did. But anyway, my friends were like, well, why'd you bring him here? And I was like, pull my hair out. Jesus says, you know what? Nobody's perfect. Everybody's welcome. And anything's possible. That statement isn't my own. That's what Jesus lived out in his life. Jesus said, hey, look, I'm going to go to the tax collectors. I'm going to sit and talk with a prostitute. I'm going to go to Samaria, talk to the adulterer at the well who's got 5 husbands. And I'm not going to sit there and say, this is, all messed up. I'm going to bring the message of Jesus to you. I'm going to let the love of Jesus change you. I want you to know that we're a church where it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to come here and have a messed up life. I believe that the love of God says it's okay to not be okay, and we love you too much to let you stay that way. Okay? We're in the process of transforming and changing, but we can't look at somebody and say, you can't be a part of our community unless you change. We go to people, we go to where they're at, and we bring the message of Jesus to where they're at. We don't put up a flag and say, come to us. Jesus went to them. Jesus boldly went to Caesarea Philippi. What does that mean for you in your personal life? Work, friends, family, children. What does going to Caesarea Philippi and being a bringer look like? This is part of training in our calling, like we talked about last week. I think being a bringer is a part of training in our calling. It's something that God wrote on our hearts and on our lives. Being a bringer it's just a part of, it's choosing to be somebody. It's choosing to be the person that God created us to be. And I think it's a part of going on the adventure that God created us to live. I don't think Frodo Baggins, when he was, at the pit of Mount Doom, was like, oh, this is awesome. But we look at his life and we say, I want that for me. And there's a part of it that's like, okay, this is going to be difficult and scary, but I believe that there's meaning in it, that God wrote it on our hearts to be adventurers and to boldly go. I challenge you guys to do it. And the last thing, as far as boldly going goes, or boldly bringing goes, I think it means to get rid of the statement, if you build it, they'll come. Okay? We're building a new church building. I'm excited by it. I believe that people are going to come check out our church when we build a new building. Very exciting. That's going to be great. I think some people will be excited by it. I think it'll be the most beautiful building in town. I think people are going to love it. But I'm not going to put our calling on consignment as a church and say, when we build a church, 2016, that's when it's going to happen. God has a calling on us today. We're not going to live in if you build it, they'll come. We're going to do ministry today. We're going to take ground today. Okay? And I want you to understand that this building, churches have been dealt worse hands building-wise, and they're winning with them. I want to win with this right now. Okay? This is not a handicap. This is a blessing, and we can do great things with this right now. Right here. There's a story of a friend of mine named Bobby W. And he, was a kid that I'd been doing ministry with for a long time. I've been trying to share Jesus with him, and he was always like, God's not for me, whatever. And he came around church when his friends came around church, and I saw him every now and then. He was a good kid, but he had some problems. He was in and out of prison and whatnot. And I remember one time, I hadn't seen him for a few months because he'd been in prison, and actually like a year. But anyway, he came out. And I saw him at church because a bunch of his friends were there. It was like a weeknight event. It wasn't a weekend event. And I thought, I should invite him to church, but I've done it a bunch of times. We were in the process of a building project, and I knew when it was built, this guy always went to where the party was at. So I knew he was going to come in 2 months when the building project was completed anyway. I had a bunch of people I was talking to, and I was like, I don't know. I don't really need to talk to him. But finally, I went over and I talked with Bobby, and it turned out he'd given his life to Christ while he was in prison, which was really exciting. We sat down, we shared our stories, with each other, and he'd just become a follower of God, and God was changing and reforming his life. And he just told me, he said, John, I want my life to bring this message to other people. Like, Jesus has set me free from so much. Jesus is changing my heart. I want my life to bring this message, to other people. And 2 weeks later, he died, and I got to do his funeral. And I'm so glad that I talked to him that night. And I know that God had ordained it and made it happen. But at his funeral, I just got to share the conversation that I had with Bobby. And there was about 700 people there, and about 500 of them, including his mom, dad, and brother, gave their lives to Christ. It changed the life of our church forever because all those people started coming to church, hearing the message of Jesus. It transformed our city. All because we said, we're not going to put our calling on consignment. We're going to do ministry today. And God forbid that I had been like, when we build it, he'll come. Because that's not what God called us to do. He called us to do ministry now. Our time is today. This is the place. And I don't know. I don't know when it, is Jesus going to come back? Is the world going to exist when it comes? I don't know. God called us to do ministry today, now. This is the place. This is the time. Boldly pioneering, boldly bringing, and the third one is boldly making space. Boldly making space. I know right now it doesn't look like it because we actually have a much better attendance than I expected today. I'm proud of you guys. I cruised here in the Prius at 55 miles an hour, and I have like an all-terrain vehicle, so it was no problem. I put it in low two-wheel front drive, and it was fine. You know, I didn't really have an issue. I brought a friend to church today, and he was doing great. He's like, great, I'm in a car with an Asian person while it's snowing. This is like, this is bad. This is very bad. In a Prius, it's threes. It's bad. We got 3 strikes against us. But we made it, and I'm proud of you guys for being here today. But, you know, normally on the weekend, we've been generally, especially in these 2 sections, very, very full. And what I've been hating is that the worst seats in the house have been going to first-timers. Additionally, you know, we've got 25 to 30 adults who are in Florida right now, and our attendance on the weekend really hasn't dropped. And I believe that we're actually continuing to grow. Even though all those people left, we're still keeping steady, and I think we're going to continue to see more people come. Most church research says that especially millennials hate touching people because we spend all our time texting and through mediated communication, and if I have to sit next to somebody and my arm happens to brush against them, it's like, ah! I touched somebody! I had a human interaction! You know? The numbers keep getting worse, but as far as that goes, you know, they say that when churches are 80% full for millennials, they're very full. And with our East Wing, I think it skews our numbers because it's a messed up wing. I'm really grateful for the leadership team that decided to build that. If you're in here, thank you. Good work. Good work. Love it! Really glad it's here. But seriously, I would like us to try going to 2 services for the month of April. Because we're going to see, I think, a boost of attendance in April. Traditionally, we always do. I don't think we're going to have room for it. I'm only talking about 4 weeks. And I know some of you guys are like, but we'll split up the family. And I've done 8 services. But 2 services in particular, I think it's more of a family dynamic because everybody has to get out of the auditorium and go downstairs into the fellowship hall. So you've got both services, everybody interacting, socializing. It's crazy. It's fun in there. Again, we're only trying it for 4 weeks. I don't want the church to feel like it's completely empty. Going from 1 to 2 services is the most difficult. So right now we're planning on just blocking off half the East Wing. Okay, so that people who still sit in the East Wing can still have that space, but the back half, the worst half of the East Wing will be blocked off. And then we might curtain, pipe, and drape a part of the back end of the West Wing. I know Rachel's back there like, no! You will not take my West Wing! No. You'll still have back pews-ish, I promise. But they'll just be a little farther forward back. So that's good. We're going to do that. And again, we're just trying it for 4 weeks because, look, we want to boldly make space, you know, and you might look at this and say, man, I love the community here. I love the friendships and connections I have here. What if we make spaces in our lives so that other people can find that too? You know, what if we say, hey, I'm going to put my personal preference aside. Jesus went to Caesarea Philippi. It was a week out of his way. It wasn't convenient. I think I can do this. This is a way that I can serve Jesus. I'm excited about it. You know, additionally, I think boldly making space means community circles is what we're calling them. They used to be called small groups. I want to make it clear. I'm not asking nobody to break up a small group. I don't want to end a small group. I don't want to break up a small group. If you have a small group that's full and you've been meeting for 25 years, I'd encourage you to find a way to let new people in your community because you have a blessed community and that's part of sharing. But I'm not telling you. We're not going to tell you that you have to do that, okay? What we want to do is we want to create opportunity for people to get plugged into our community. I believe that we can do that really simply. The biggest barrier for community circles or leading a small group is thinking, what am I going to teach and how am I going to teach it? So here's how we're going to do it. Starting in March, Wednesday, March 5th, once a month, I'm going to get together with anybody who wants to facilitate a community circle, and we're going to go through just like, here's curriculum that you could teach for this month. Here's exactly how it would go, and the goal is for you to get together with 3 to 5 of your friends one time a month. I won't lie to you, my wife and I are like, the idea of getting together every single week for all eternity is terrifying. I'm like, I can't do that, okay? I got kids. I don't have time for that. But once a month, if you went through the small group leaders training class, please come to the Community Circle Facilitator Group once a month, first Wednesday of the month in March. And this is part of making space for new people in our church to connect, not just come, but to connect with the body of Christ here. I think that's part of it. I think we have to boldly make space. That's what boldly going looks like for us. It's letting people we don't know into our hearts and getting to know them. I dare you to do it. I dare you to try it. Now, I know a lot of you guys are like, well, why is it worth it, Pastor? Because I won't lie, there's a lot of inconvenience for me in this. Why is this really worth it? And I think that's a very fair question. I think the disciples were asking it. Back to Matthew 16, verse 13, the last half, Jesus asks his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? And he's asking this because the disciples are all terrified and really questioning whether or not they want to follow Jesus. I'm asking this church to do something bold, and I believe that there's probably a lot of you in here who are thinking, well, is it really worth it? Is it really worth doing this? Jesus knows his disciples are thinking these thoughts, and he says, well, who do you think that I am? Who do people say that I am? His disciples say, well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, others say Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. They're flattering him, but sidestepping the question. You know, Jesus says, do I look fat in this dress? And the disciples say, no, just kidding, Jesus doesn't do that. But you know what they're doing? They're sidestepping the issue, okay? They're not actually answering it. So Jesus holds their feet to the coals, and then he asks them, but who do you say that I am? The disciples are scared and possibly offended because Jesus is offending their religion by going to Caesarea Philippi. I want to make it clear that that is the dynamic that's in this story. Jesus is offending their religion, ritual, rules, and tradition. Okay? They used to do this stuff. They used to do, and Jesus is going to Caesarea Philippi. I'm not comfortable with this. I don't know if I'm comfortable with this song about Frozen, this devil song in the service. I don't know if I'm comfortable with a service called 50 Shades of Marriage. I don't know if I'm comfortable going into this city where they do all this debauch. I don't know if I'm comfortable putting a tree up in my house because that's a pagan worship symbol and Yuletide is awful and we were taught our whole life that it's terrible. I don't know if I'm comfortable with all this stuff. And Jesus says, well, look, who do you think I am? Who do you think I am? Because that's what answers this question right here. That's what answers this question. Many theologians believe that this could be a place where Judas had the beginnings of betrayal, the seeds of betrayal planted in his heart. Because he's like, this offends me. I don't like this. I don't know if I can handle this guy Jesus. I gave up everything I had to follow him. I sold all my belongings so I could follow him for the next few years. And I don't know if I like this. This is a place where I believe many people who claim to be Jesus followers end up saying, I can't do it. I can't follow Jesus radically because it is a ridiculous thing to do. It is ridiculous to think about going to Caesarea Philippi. And yet, the question comes down to, who do you think that Jesus is? Is he a moral influence? Is he a good man? Is he a prophet? Or is he God? That's the question of the moment in this passage. Because if he is who he says he is, if he's God, then we'll go. Then we'll go, of course. Of course he's right. And if he isn't, then it's not. So Jesus says, who do you think I am? That's why he's asking him this question in this moment. They're outside of Caesarea Philippi. Guys, I know a lot of you are scared. Who do you think that I am right now? Because if you're going to follow me into this city, you have to sit down and figure out, who do you think that Jesus is? And Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. In one of the most famous and bold declarations of all of Scripture. Church, do we believe this? Do we believe this about Jesus? Do we believe this is the truth? Do we trust the words of Christ here? Do we believe that he is who he says he is? Because if we believe that, then going to Caesarea Philippi becomes easy. It becomes something that's simple. It becomes a no-brainer. He's God. Of course I'll go there. He says he's got my back. He's the Lord of heaven's armies. I'm going there. Jesus replies, ding, 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 you're right. You're right. He says, you are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. He's saying, hey, guess what? In case any of y'all were doubting, Peter's words are from God. Okay? Peter's words are God's words. So you can't doubt that. God gave that to him. You can't doubt. You can't say that Peter was wrong. He says, now I say to you that you are Peter, which means rock, and upon this rock I will build my church. And this is what I want you to understand. Again, I keep saying this is what I want you to understand. I say that a lot. Okay, I'm going to stop saying that. Here's something that's cool. Check this out. Jesus ain't talking about Peter's name being rock. Peter's name does mean rock. But the implication and syntax of this sentence implies that Jesus is saying, on the rock of Peter's statement, on the rock of Peter's statement, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. On that statement, on that rock, on that declaration, I will build my church. And then I believe standing on the precipice of the mountain looking over the city, he says, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. He says, I will build my church on my declaration that I'm the Son of God. And the gates of hell will not prevail against it, will not overcome it. And I want you to, here's another cool thought. Everybody thought here's another cool thought. I lost my train of thought. Golly, John, you just got to leave it in there. So for years, I used to think that this was Jesus saying, we're not going to be overcome by evil. right? The gates of hell will not prevail against it. They're not gonna win over us. This is what I want you to understand. Yeah, I'm just gonna do it. It's good. Jesus looks at the city. Gates are a defensive weapon. He's not saying evil's going to prevail against us. He's saying we're going in there. We're boldly going, and their gates aren't going to stop us. We're not on the defensive. We're on the offensive. Jesus says, I am the Lion of Judah. We are lions. We're not made to sit and cower in fear. We're made to roar at it. I had an old boss who used to say, John, I want you to roar at this. I want you to crush it. I'm tired of being a church that says, oh, what if we, are you sure we can? Let's roar at it, church. Let's roar at Jasper County. Let's say we got this, because the gates of hell will not prevail against us. We're on the offense. We're not on defense. God has a plan for us, and we're going boldly because God's hand is on us. That's the message of the Bible. We're on the offense. Look, guys, as we close and Grant comes up to play great music. Elise comes up to play great music. I think about that movie. I think about George Kirk laying down his life for his family. And I didn't even understand that movie until I had children. But once I had children and I thought about the decision that George Kirk made, I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. I would die for my kids in a heartbeat. Physically, like if it came to it, of course. Like, I would die for my children in half a heartbeat. There'd be no decision about it. I don't care. I don't have to think twice about it. It's funny to me that it's easy to die for my kids physically, but sometimes it's difficult to die for our children in the next generation spiritually. It's difficult to put aside our personal preference and the things that we want so that they can hear the message of the gospel. When I was 11 years old, or 12, 13, I decided that I was an atheist. I decided I don't think I believe in the God stuff. I told my parents that. We were at a church that really was struggling. It was very, very small. There was no youth program there. There was nothing that spoke to us. My parents loved it, okay? They loved it. They had community. They had friends. They had whatever. I could not follow God in that church. I heard nothing in the service. It was just the service, just over my head. And my parents, I believe, died to their preferences and to themselves spiritually to get me to a place where I could hear the message of the gospel, and left all their friends and their family. They laid down their lives so that Enoch and I could know Jesus. They died to their own desires spiritually so that their children could hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. Our vision statement is generation after generation becoming fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. I thank God that generations before me died to themselves spiritually and changed services from Dutch to English. I thank God that generations before me, people died to themselves spiritually so that we could have a piano in church, so all you piano-loving people could hear worship music that you relate to. I thank God that generations ago, 10 years ago, a decade ago, people died to their personal preference and put away hymns that they loved that were rich with tradition and meaning to them, and started singing songs that were relatively meaningless to them, so that they could boldly go where no church was going to reach people that no one else was reaching. If we can die for our children physically, can't we put aside our personal preferences spiritually so that we can reach a generation, so that we can bring a revival to Jasper County, so that God can use us to reach an entire generation of people, not just our children, but their friends and their families and the culture? Can't we retake ground? Can't we roar at something? Can't we be a part of boldly going? I want to live an adventure. I want to live a life that is meaningful. This isn't for me. This is for our children. This is an opportunity for us as a church to be heroic and to boldly go. This is not just a sacrifice church. This is part of a great adventure. And I'm inviting you to come on it with us, to get on it and say, we're going to do this. We're going on an adventure. And I thank God that I get to be a part of it. It's not about what I'm giving up in the past. It's about where we're going as a church in the future. I'm not going to miss it. We're laying down our lives for the generations. We're boldly going where no church in DeMotte is going because we believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of the living God. And where He goes, we will go. Let's close in prayer. Jesus, I thank You for Your hand on us as a church. I thank You that we get to be a part of a great adventure. I thank You that You weren't meek and mild, but You were strong and wild. I thank You that You are the Lion of Judah, and You give us everything we need to roar at the world. I thank You that You said, I will build My church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. And Lord, today as a church, we dedicate ourselves to boldly going where You call us, no matter the cost, because we love You. because you delight in us, because you rescued us, and because you are the Son of the living God. In the name of Jesus, we ask and pray these things. Amen.